From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I am your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast is Andre Johnson
Jr.
Do not forget the JR at the end of the name. It's very important to remember the Junior. But before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, and review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. And boy, do we have a fire topic today. It is Wednesday, normally a big day in the practice routine, but because of Monday Night Football, the Saints, Wednesday is now their Tuesday, and Thursday will be their Wednesday, and so forth and so on. A later week this week, obviously, with Monday Night Football, followed by a short week next week. It is what it is when the NFL schedule comes out. So before we get into the fire content today, Andre Johnson Jr., how you feeling?
It feels weird, Sean. You know, normally we've heard from Dennis Allen.
I know, we're so
at this
busy
point.
this day normally, right?
Wednesday is a big day for us. We got Dennis Allen talking. We got Derek Carr talking. You guys are probably going to get a player or two in the locker room. We got Fox 8 game plan for tonight. So typically Wednesdays are busy, but it's been real lax today here at 5.
Yeah,
Fox
it almost
8.
makes me feel a little uneasy when it gets almost too lax. Like, what's going on here? I'm supposed to be doing more today. But that didn't stop the news about the Saints or indirectly about the Saints from hitting the airwaves today. Was something that we really wanted to dive into because, as we know, there's a star receiver out there that ain't happy in his current situation and wants out. And it just so happens he has a connection to New Orleans. And apparently, New Orleans is on his wish list of teams to go to. Why don't you fill in the rest for me?
Yeah, you know, Devante Adams, 6-time Pro Bowler, 3-time All-Pro wide receiver. Once upon a time, Sean, he was in Green Bay. He left Green Bay to go to Las Vegas to play with the Raiders because his college quarterback, Derek Carr at the time, was a Raider. 1 year later, Derek Carr comes to New Orleans. Ever since then, Devante Adams has not been happy with the Raiders in a losing situation. So now he has reportedly requested a trade, and reportedly one of the top 2 teams on his wish list, number 1, New York Jets, where Aaron Rodgers, another quarterback he played for, is. Number 2, New Orleans, where his college quarterback, who he once left Aaron Rodgers for, is currently. So, Sean, with the Saints on Devante Adams' wish list, one of the best wide receivers in the NFL over the last decade, should the Saints be interested in pursuing Devante Adams?
Oh, I love this topic. Oh, I love this topic today. First things first, it makes sense not just for Devante Adams to want to come here, but also for the Raiders to send him here to New Orleans, down south, but more importantly, safely in the NFC, far, far away from the AFC. We saw the Jets mentioned, but that's obviously an AFC team. Not AFC West, but an AFC team. We mentioned, I saw the Dolphins was up there, another AFC team. Also saw the Chiefs. There is no way they would want to send him, those bitter rivals within the division, in the same season, even if the Chiefs had a better offer. The price gets doubled when you talk about in the division. I have never, I don't want to say never because sometimes the mind will go that far back, but it's rare you would trade a player in the division within the season, even if all those teams have better offers. So that's one. To me, the Saints would provide the perfect landing spot for both the Raiders and Adams, who clearly Adams has made it known he wants out. Certainly feels like the Raiders understand that request and are looking to move in that direction, whichever direction that may be. And obviously they're coming from a position of strength in terms of they are going to try to get the best move for their franchise, and Adams hopefully could land in a place where he wants to go. Point number 2, should the Saints be interested? Let me unequivocally and positively say 100 million billion %, yes, they should. Check our receipts from training camp. Yours truly, you as well, my friend. Argue then, and we will argue now, that this offense is probably going to need one more playmaker on that side of the ball, regardless of where it's at, whether it's wide receiver, whether it's a pass-catching tight end, whether or not it's another running back. They're going to need one. From a purely numbers standpoint, without at least one more, I just fear this offense is never going to completely reach where they want to go, completely reach its potential. And honestly, when I think back to the last 2 weeks, I think we've been proven right with that. When you talk about just the deduction of Taysom Hill, Not that they fall apart, but you can just see that the composition is off with that. When you add up the total score, without that piece gone, it really takes a bigger chunk out of the offense than you would like with one player missing. So if you add one more piece, obviously that would help absorb that blow when you lose a player. Because Taysom's not going to be the only one you lose throughout the season. Someone else is going to miss a game. I can promise you that you're counting on as a playmaker skill-wise. Adams' connection to Carr, you mentioned it. Fresno State obviously is one. And in their lone season back in 2022, a bad year for Derek Carr, the year the Raiders considered him damaged goods. Adams still had 100 receptions, 1,516 yards, and 14 touchdowns. So regardless of how weird that year was for the Raiders, and it was, I remember watching the Raiders because I was curious about Daniels and just what he could bring to that organization. It just never felt right because of all the drama that had been involved with the Raiders prior with John Gruden. So I remember watching that situation play out, and obviously Devante Adams getting traded there from Green Bay was certainly something that I paid attention to. Also at 6'1", 215 pounds, he adds a different dynamic physically in that he can be physical. I like the Saints receivers, but right now their top three guys are all smaller, little guys. Chris Olave, Rashid Shaheed, Mason Tipton. I was on the radio a couple hours ago, and I said, who is truly the Saints' number 3 receiver? By numbers, it's Mason Tipton. Sometimes it's Cedric Wilson, but no one has truly emerged. And I understand Clint Kubiak prefers bigger, heavier personnel on the field with this style of this offense or this version of this offense, but it sure would be nice if you had a game-changing number 3 receiver in those end-of-game situations that you have been in the last couple of weeks. Plus, he can also excel in the slot. Something they don't have right now from a true receiver. I mean, I think they would like Mason Tipton to be that guy, but Mason Tipton is a 9-route guy. He's probably more in the mold of Rashid Shaheed than they want to admit. He's not a sharp route runner guy. He's not a work the middle of the field guy. He likes to either run the slant or run the go. Plus, at 31, Adams turns 32 in December. I think he's still got plenty of juice left. And I know he's rehabbing as the hamstring issue. But I've been in this game a long time, my friend. Not playing, but covering. You'd be surprised how quickly someone heals when they leave a place they don't want to be and arrive at somewhere where they are fresh and happy and everybody loves them. So for all those reasons, yes. Make the call, Saints.
Well, there's good news and bad news. There are pros and cons when it comes to potentially bringing Devante Adams to the Saints. And I want to talk about one of the cons, Sean, because we're going to get to all of the pros. We're going to have to start, if he were to come to New Orleans, we're going to have to start getting real specific about who we call DA. Because, we've been calling DA, we've been saying DA is Dennis Allen. You get Devante Adams over here. DA might have to leave our vocabulary. We're going to have to start getting real specific. But that's really the only con to bringing one of the greatest receivers over the last decade to New Orleans.
Deal breaker. Done.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Really consider that. But also consider that he's had over 1,000 yards in 5 of his last 6 seasons. And by the way, the one season where he didn't reach 1,000 yards, he had 997.
Ooh.
3 yards away. Oh, no. But, one thing that really gets underrated in this league, especially on teams with young units, is veteran leadership. When you look at the Saints wide receiver room, Chris Olave, who's in his 3rd season, Rashid Shaheed in his 3rd season, A.T. Perry, 2nd season, and Mason Tipton, who is an undrafted rookie. You've got your top 4 of your top 5 receivers, all relatively young and inexperienced in this league. You bring in a guy like Devante Adams who has been there and done that in regards to every defense, every coverage, anything that you can see from an opposing secondary or defensive coordinator, and you get that football mind in there with the likes of Olave, with the likes of Shaheed. I think that it'll be that iron sharpens iron effect. Not only will he make your offense better in what he can do, he'll make your offense better in the way that he can elevate those around him like Olave, like Shaheed, like Tipton, And when you talk about elevation, one area that Devante Adams excels in, probably better than anybody else in the NFL, is route running. And that's what we've been talking about when they went to this new system. unlocking something on Olave. Rashid Shaheed, who we know can get behind the defense, but can he run every route in the route tree? Learning from a guy like DA, I think, could only help them in the long run. Yeah, right. See what I mean? That DA, you never know who I'm talking about. But and this is also, the Saints, they're a team that believes that their championship window is still open.
That's it.
They think that their championship window is still open. However, you could argue it's closing. You've got a lot of big-time players on this team who are older. You're already seeing the decline in snaps for Cam Jordan. The Mario Davis just missed his first game in his Saints tenure due to injury. Tyrann Mathieu isn't exactly 25 years old anymore. Derek Carr isn't exactly 25 years old anymore. Alvin Kamara's pushing 30. Taysom Hill doesn't act like it, but he's 34. A lot of your big playmakers on both sides of the ball are older. So, yes, your championship window may still be open, but it's closing. So bringing in a guy who's proven, who can play at an elite level will help your team in so many ways. It might be a little confusing when those DAs start getting thrown around, but other than that, Sean, I think it's worth it.
I think it's worth it. And look at the position that you're in kind of as a franchise with your head coach and your quarterback. I mean, next year is not necessarily guaranteed, probably more so for Derek Carr. He'll be here, but you never know if the things slip away this season when it comes to DA. Then it's how I'm talking about, not Devante Adams. And I do think the first two games of the season really got this organization refreshed, rejuvenated, and motivated to get back to those days. I mean, they saw how the Dome was. They understood, and they understand what a player like this can certainly add to the organization. So I think where you're at currently and what you can really, it's not unrealistic to say they can win the NFC South and get back in the playoffs. I think that is the bare minimum of where you want to, that's the threshold you want to meet. This, to me, is a move that can get you there. Even if it takes a little while for it to connect, it could get you there. So I think that's certainly something that's worthwhile pursuit. I don't know how far along they would be in this, but look, that got leaked for a reason to Adam Schefter that the Jets and the Saints were atop his wish list. Okay, I don't want to say out of nowhere, but clearly in his camp, someone is saying that because they are trying to entice those two teams to pick up the phone and call. So I don't know if the call's already been made. I was told this was earlier that initial discussions have not started yet, but again, that was earlier. That could could have changed over the last few hours. So I'm gonna hopefully get another update here as well later today. But nonetheless, I think we're in agreement here. And for those that aren't, please let me know why. I mean, why wouldn't you be at this point? So that's to me where we stand. I think this is an absolute no-brainer. Now, we can call it a no-brainer. We can say make the deal, whatever. But it all boils down to what?
For those who may not like the move, this might be their why, and that comes down to what it would potentially take to get Devante Adams to New Orleans. So, Sean, it's going to have to be via trade. What kind of compensation would you give up for Devante Adams to get him here?
It's true. Here comes the hard part.
Yeah.
And by us saying we would make the pursuit of Devante Adams does not mean we're saying, by all means, go get this guy. Because if you don't want to get roped into a bad deal. You don't want to get roped into a situation that's going to hamstring your franchise. You don't want to get roped into a situation where it doesn't work out for the New Orleans Saints. So here comes the hard part. It's compensation and it's cap complications, because that's always the case. When these deals get done, particularly a team like the Saints that have used cap gymnastics for the last few years, and there aren't very many point A to point B deals when it comes to the Saints right now because of these types of situations of how they've lived salary cap wise, really for the better part. I mean, you probably call it almost like a decade by now. I mean, when you talk about where they currently stand with the salary cap situation, the Raiders are going to want fair value, as they should. He is a prime asset for their team, and he wants out. They're going to want proper compensation, but when a player gets there mentally, it's kind of hard for the toothpaste to go back in the tube. I mean, it's just at some point this deal is going to get done. He is going to be playing elsewhere at some point. The Saints are not going to want to take on that full cap hit. So it's a lot of numbers coming at you right now. I don't want y'all to lose me here. So according to overthecap.com, the Saints have 2.7 in cap space. According to the NFLPA website, the Saints have 3.2 million in cap space. Adams carries a $16.89 million base salary for next season. It gets prorated weekly. So by the time a deal will get done, the Saints or whoever the team would be by week 5, for this math problem, it's about $1 million a week. So by week 5, you're probably talking about somewhere, it's a little less than $1 million, somewhere around, again, for this math problem, let's call it $12 million, okay? $12 million in cap space the Saints would need. So there is your dilemma. $12 million to take on with $2.7 million or $3 million in space available. Most teams would look at that and think, but we know the Saints have made this work before. We know the Saints have made this work before. So the phone call must still be made. If I'm the Saints, I'm starting at a 3, but I'm willing to go to the second round, which is what the Raiders want, provided they take at least half the bill. I'll give you your second round pick, but of that $13 million or $12 million, you get $6 million is going to stay on your books. And they've got the cap space to absorb it this year. $6 million is going to stay on your books, and $6 million will take on. Now that leaves you with, you lose your second round pick next year, but $6 million in cap space you need with only $3 million available. Well, then it's simple. Then it's simple at that point. You can do the trick they've been doing for years. Do the normal base salary, convert it to the signing bonus, spread it out. If you want to add voidable years, so be it. And I think, unless my math is totally wrong, if you were able to get that kind of agreement between the Raiders and you could probably make that fit nice and neat on the salary cap and then move forward. Because even if you do that and you convert and you spread it out over the life of the contract, I know the next 2 years, it's non-guaranteed money, so you add a little bit of guaranteed funds, but what little bit you would add in that scenario would not, if you had to move on from Devante after this year, we were really far down the theoretical path here, but if you had to get rid of him, yes, it would be a little more expensive to do so, but you're still coming out well on top. Again, it's something the Saints have done before. Again, and it's non-guaranteed money next year, and if it worked out, you could renegotiate a whole new salary, a whole new contract for the 32-year-old who will be 32 at that point next year. So, that's where I'm at with it from a number standpoint. Is there another tradable player that could offset compensation, make it a later pick, and maybe offset some of the cap requirements? I know Lattimore's name's been out there for a long time. I just watched Paulson Adebo have 3 penalties, and he wants a contract. Is he someone that you could maybe swap with and maybe throw a late round pick in to absorb some of that cap situation and maybe make the numbers work? I think that's possible. I certainly think that's possible, especially since there's no guarantee Paulson Adebo is going to get paid. And if you can get an asset for him at a position where you're pretty strong at the cornerback position, then I wouldn't turn away from that. I wouldn't disregard that. So bottom line is this. In case you haven't figured out yet, but on this podcast, this is something the Saints need to take a strong look at. Because if you truly think you are close and you truly want to get back in the playoffs after 3 straight seasons of not making it, which feels like 30, and get out of this little cycle of mediocrity, this cycle of 500 that you've been in, this is the type of addition that can push you over the top. But business is business. Trades are trades. You can control what you want to do. You can't control what the other team wants to do. And if you can't come to a deal, you don't come to a deal, and everybody shakes hands and moves on. And it kind of gives you a thrill, and you really don't know what goes on behind the scenes. But nonetheless, you got to at least make the effort.
Definitely. And it really comes down to where you think you are as an organization. If you think your championship window is still open and you just need one more piece that can maybe push you over the top, this is the type of deal that you would make. Now, if you're thinking towards the future, because I agree, a second-round pick is probably what it's going to take to get the deal done. You look at the history of the second-round picks the Saints have made in recent history, they draft very well in the second round. You go to this past draft, Kool-Aid McKinstry, they traded up to get him. Obviously, it's too soon to say what he'll be. He really hasn't been in a situation to get consistent playing time. Isaiah Foskey, they're going to start mumbling that he's a bust soon. He really hasn't done anything in his season and a fourth here in New Orleans. But you get past that. 2022, Alontae Taylor.
Good.
You could argue that Alontae Taylor so far this season has been your best DB. 2021, Pete Werner, a solid starter in the middle next to Demario Davis the past few years. Didn't have one in 2020. But in 2019,
I know you're going with
Eric McCoy.
Yep.
The face of your offensive line, the best O-lineman you have, your center that you are missing right now. 2017, didn't have one in 18. So 2017, Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams was a solid starter for the Saints for a few seasons. And then 2016, a guy who maybe became a headache later on in his career, but at his peak, he was elite, and that's Michael Thomas.
And he wasn't the only second-round pick that year either. I think Von Bell was as well.
Yeah, Von Bell was as well. So Von Bell, Michael Thomas, Marcus Williams, Eric McCoy, Pete Werner, Alontae Taylor, all drafted in the second round in the past 8 seasons. So you have been very solid when it came to second, and you've had some really good picks in the third round as well over the last few years. So that's kind of, those day 2 picks is one of the areas that the Saints excel in when it comes to drafting. Now, if you're going to go get Devante Adams, it's going to take some of those day 2 picks. It's going to take a second rounder, maybe a third rounder and something else. And that's an area that the Saints have picked well in. So if you're looking towards the future, you may ask yourself, is it worth it to invest that kind of pick into a guy who is about to be 32 years old, at the wide receiver position? I think it is, because I think that if you get Devante Adams, it's a win now move. But those who don't think you should get Devante Adams, that's probably why.
I think every organization has to understand when is it time to devote to the present and when is it time to be patient and let some things play out for the betterment of the future. I think this offseason, we saw a patient team that didn't go crazy with contract restructures and all that stuff that can get you in cap trouble and could, make problems for you down the road. This scenario here, with the way the season has started off, I think this is a golden opportunity to add to an opportunity to a golden opportunity to add to a team that has. I think through 4 weeks you can say this team, and if you look at the rest of the schedule, this team's got an opportunity. This team's got a chance.
Yeah.
This team is realistically. I still think this team can make the playoffs. So if you can add to that with a guy that's dynamic, that has chemistry with your quarterback. Now, he's never played in this exact system, but he's a smart football player. He knows what he's doing. So I think you can certainly, and then he could add some versatility because, I've talked about this. The Saints have probably, I don't know the other analytics from other teams, but they don't run a whole lot of 3 receiver sets. And I think some of that is predicated on the fact that they don't have one. They don't have one that they trust in true passing situations. So this can add another layer of not just a playmaker, but another layer of, I call it diversity or versatility to your offense that might be missing. And I think that's a box that you can check. And given what you would have to surrender, if it's a second-round pick, I know those names are fantastic. And I mean, there was a run. I did a study. This is earlier in my career of how many second-round picks the Saints hit on. It was better than first-round picks. I mean, I'm right there with you. But if this guy can help you right now and the cost compensation works and it doesn't bury you in the future, because that's always we can do the restructure here, but does it bury you in the future and you got to hold to this guy too long? Is it going to hurt you down the road when it's time to get rid of him and you got to take on too much dead money? I mean, the numbers, the math, the formula I laid out, that doesn't seem all that burdensome for years to come. So to me, this is a potential high reward for, I don't know if I'd call it a low risk, but it feels like a fairly a good move for the Saints to pursue, just because I mean, realistically, the Saints offense is good. It's really good when they have all their weapons. But if they had one more, even if it meant when they're all healthy, not everyone is getting the numbers, but the inevitability of some Olave getting hurt for a game, or Shaheed getting hurt for a game, or Taysom getting banged up for a game, or Alvin getting hurt for a game, sure, it'd be nice to have that extra playmaker. And I think that makes it worth it, based on what we've seen the first 4 weeks of the season.
And it's mentioning that Clint Kubiak comes from San Francisco. And in San Francisco, Christian McCaffrey ate in the passing game, Deebo Samuel ate, Brandon Ayuk ate, George Kittle ate, and even Jawan Jennings in the Super Bowl had the big game. So that's 5 receiving threats that got consistent production in that offense, because that's just the type of offense that this is. So there's definitely room for the guys that the Saints have now And if they were to add Devante Adams, there's room for everybody to eat. And I think this deal works not only for the Saints, but for the Raiders too, because when you look at the names of the teams that are kind of in contention, the Chiefs, you're not giving an elite wide receiver to the best quarterback in the league who's in your division.
Right.
The Jets and the Dolphins, those are two teams. Dolphins is kind of unsure because you don't know what's going to happen with Tua, but those are two teams with playoff aspirations. If you're the Raiders and you think that that's where you can be as a team, you don't want to see Devante Adams in the playoffs. Same with the Steelers, who are 3-1 right now. You look at the Saints, NFC team, they're not in your division, they're not in your conference. It's a lot cleaner. Now, I will say, the Saints play the Raiders this year.
Yeah.
I can't think off the top of my head what week it is, but I know the Saints play the entire AFC West, which means if Devante Adams was a Saint, he would get that revenge matchup at one point this year.
Yeah, something just popped in my head when you were saying that. A guy like Devante Adams could add some touches, which think about in the grand scheme, in the big picture. We have now talked quite a bit now about how worried we are about Alvin Kamara's touches.
Yeah.
I mean, how much that would help if another playmaker came. Now, even if Devante Adams is not here, the Saints can't make it work. I actually felt like if it wasn't a wide receiver, it would be a pass-catching tight end. I still think that's on the table. So even if Devante is not the guy that can't make the numbers work, too expensive, couldn't quite do compensation, I still think the Saints should be on the lookout for some type of playmaker to add to their offense this season.
And, while we're talking about trades, there is a guy in Baltimore who is not getting used at the tight end position who has been very good over the last few years. Mark Andrews.
Yes, one of my favorite players in the league. Underrated player. And he's had a rough stretch of it, but Isaiah Likely is kind of taking his spot. So if he becomes available, that would certainly be nice. Heck of a discussion today. Good stuff. We'll see what happens with Devante Adams. Great podcast topic. All right, we're out of time. All right, for Andre Johnson Jr., I am Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.